Hello Fleet, and welcome back to episode 5 of Nautical Tales, the weekly show where I highlight some of your replays. And so without much further hesitation, let's get going. Today's first replay comes from Robertob. Now, let's take a quick look at what's happening. Robert's team has pretty much stomped the other team into the ground. But there's just one tiny little problem. There's an enemy Tenru who's managed to get into their cap. And as you start to hear this dreaded tick-tock going down, you know that time is starting to run out. And if you look on the map, the only person who is remotely close to resetting this cap is Robert. So Robert is heading back as fast as he can in a Isokaze in order to try to get a shot in. But remember, in the Isokaze, if you're going bow first, you've only got one gun. So as the sort of cap bar fills up, Robert has one shot the minute he spots the ship. There it is. There's the Tenru. He fires the one shot. If he misses this, it's all over. Oh, would you look at that? Robert manages to reset the cap, but he doesn't actually hit the Tenru. What he manages to reset with was, I think, the high explosive splash damage, because there was no target hit at all. It was just a reset, and there was no damage taken by the Tenru at all. So talk about making that one shot and only that one shot count. So Robert, that was really good. Be able to pull off that shot under that much pressure, knowing that if you'd missed, you would have lost your team the battle. That was good. And of course, Robert fires off a salvo of torpedoes. That Tenru, to my knowledge, was doing something a little silly, like trying to back up. So Robert is going to bag himself that kill and get himself a Confederate badge. Good job, Robert. Thank you for that replay, and what a clutch performance there. Now, moving on to our next replay by Rylee, and Rylee's in New Mexico, and Rylee has run into a very, very juicy target. That is an enemy Atago. And that Atago has presented a broadside to a battleship, and if you're shooting AP with a battleship and there's a cruiser doing that, this is what happens. 3 citadels, 3 target hits, and that cruiser gets instantaneously nuked. And watch the chat. Someone is real salty about that. Thanks, Rylee. Alright, Zulu 018 is in an Isokaze, and Zulu is gonna get himself into an interesting little situation. Bunch of enemy cruisers in front of him, including 2 Phoenixes. So Zulu's kind of looking at their movement and going, looks like they're coming around the island. One on this side, one on the other side. So what Zulu, I think, decides to do is, shall we say, he executes a bit of tactical beaching, shall we say, and decides that he was going to park his ship right onto an island and wait for these cruisers to come and get it. So the first Phoenix, totally unaware that there is a destroyer here, sails around the corner, and torpedoes in the water, and yeah, not a chance. That Phoenix is just getting wrecked. Now, the funny thing is, the first Phoenix gets wrecked. You figured the second Phoenix would realize that, there's a destroyer here. Nope. Kind of sails in exactly the same way as the other Phoenix. Comes straight in, eats 2 torpedoes, gets the majority of his health nuked, and Zulu has a very easy time finishing him off with guns, and thus bagging himself a double kill. Very, very nice. That tactical beaching plus that torpedo strike. Those are real nice, Zulu. Thank you for that replay. And moving on to our next replay submission, this is Maki Horikita. Oh god, I'm pronouncing that name wrong, ain't I? So, Maki here is in Cleveland, and take a look. Yeah, Maki is the last person sort of back, and the closest one to his own cap. And take a look at the number of enemy ships that have just gone into cap. There was at least a destroyer. Looks like 2 cruisers have gone in. So, Maki, who's not exactly at full health, he's lost about 1/3 of his HP in Cleveland, decides that it is going to be his job to turn around to go and try to defend the cap. And this is ballsy, because you'll see that he is not going to get the most amount of help right away from his team. His team isn't exactly reacting right away to the situation. Enemy team has managed to get onto cap already. Now, there's a battleship that you see starting to turn, but battleships don't really turn that quickly. They kind of turn really slow, which means that this base defense is gonna have to be done by one person in a Cleveland, and he's gonna be up against unknown forces, because there was some early sort of ship icons that showed up that showed 2 cruisers and a destroyer. Oh, there you go. There's the battleship and a cruiser. There's guaranteed to be a destroyer in there. There's probably another cruiser in there. So Maki is going in there by himself against overwhelming amounts of enemy forces, and I was really impressed, because typically I think in a situation like this I wouldn't have gone in as close. I might have tried to stay at range and maybe just sort of try to keep resetting the cap until the heavier ships came up to help. But what Maki does is real gutsy. I'll give him that. This is really gutsy, because he just decides that it's his job. He's gonna get in there and he's gonna reset that cap. So he's taking a look around, and there you go. There's the Myogi. That's the battleship. There's actually 2 Myogis, so that's not good. There's 2 battleships within 11 kilometers, which means a lot of heavy guns. Oh, there's a Warspite right in front of him. That Warspite's at 7 kilometers, so that's 3 battleships that are within firing range of Maki's Cleveland. So there he goes, gets the first shot in, gets the reset on the Warspite, turns his guns. You see, he doesn't actually spend all his time shooting at the Warspite. He's done his job. He's reset it. So he turns his attention around, sees torpedoes come out, and that's a lot of torpedoes, and he thinks that's probably the destroyer. Now the trajectory of the destroyer's torpedo suggests that he's probably hiding behind this island. Maki gets another shot in, resets the Phoenix. Okay, there you go. Shoots the Phoenix again, turns his guns around, sees the destroyer, gonna get the destroyer, because the destroyer is really the dangerous one, especially if it's a Minakaze. The torpedoes reload fast, and it can really end your day very, very quickly. So 2 salvos in Cleveland, sorry, he takes care of that Minakaze. That Phoenix put out the flames. Maki sets him on fire again, and that Phoenix is gonna burn. And all this time, I'm not sure if Maki actually realized that there was a Warspite that was coming in. There you go. Phoenix launches torpedoes, so if Maki keeps turning, it's over. But look who comes and saves the day. That Warspite came in for a ram, and thereby gave Maki a ram kill. And oh, remember that Phoenix that he set on fire? Yeah, burns to death. Maki went in there, defended his cap, and pretty much was a little Gandalf-esque, thou shalt not cap! Anyways, moving on. PreReformed in this next replay is in Kuma, and also very, very gutsy. There is 3 battleships, 3 Myogis, and he doesn't really have a lot of support. Take a look at the map. There's one St. Louis that's going to die right there, so it's going to be 3-on-1, and the 3 is the battleships. So PreReformed, decides that he's going to use the island as cover, launch some torpedoes against one of the battleships. And then he's going to go around the other side and see what he can do. And I mean, this is gutsy. This is actually really ballsy, because a Kuma against 1 battleship is doable. 2 battleships, that's where things get rough. 3, if those battleships do half of what they're capable of, the Kuma should be dead in the water within the first 2 salvos. But stranger things have happened in World of Warships. So PreReformed manages to get some torpedoes out, and boom, lands 2 torpedoes on a Myogi, starts to flood him. Decides to use his torpedoes again. There's on the second battleship, a different battleship, one he hasn't hit before, and the one that has more HP. Gets his torpedoes off, fires off some of his guns, but again, Akuma's guns against the battleship, even if you're firing HE, isn't really going to do that much. But the battleship doesn't really seem to notice, or doesn't really seem to pay attention that there are torpedoes coming from Akuma, so immediately eats 4 torpedoes. That battleship gets taken out, so all of a sudden this fight goes from 3-on-1 to 2-on-1. This is going to repeat itself, but you know this. PreReformed gets off another salvo torpedo on the other side, and this is why I like ships with torpedo launchers on both sides of the ship. With a lot of flexibility, you can launch one side, turn around, launch the other side against 2 different targets. Sadly, well, that battleship did actually know how to shoot, except you'd figure that if he knew how to shoot, he sort of would have predicted that there are torpedoes in the water, but didn't happen. He floods the other battleship he hit earlier to death, and then he gets himself another kill with the torpedoes he launched, and he therefore bagged himself something like 3 battleships in, I think, just over about a minute and a half. So, PreReformed, good job, real ballsy. OseanTanker, who, if you guys remembered, I think, in one of the first episodes, he did something a little derpy. So Osean has been trying to prove to me that he is actually a pretty darn good player, and he's not a derp. So he's at his Clemson, and there's 2 St. Louis's on the other side of this island. So Osean does the logical thing. He's trying to set up an ambush. which is the really smart thing where you're in a USN destroyer, right? Because, you know, USN destroyers, they're really good at ambush things because they don't really have the long-range torps. Much better at doing this. So Osean, very patiently, is sitting around this island waiting for his victims to show up. But, you know, St. Louis's, right? They're pretty slow. Even full speed, they only do like 22 knots, so it takes them a while to get around this island. And all this time, Osean doesn't move, just sits there patiently waiting for his prey. While the prey unknowingly head to their doom. This is the natural order on World of Warships. My best David Attenborough impression. Alright, back on topic. I mean, this is one of the reasons I don't like the St. Louis. Sure, they've got tons of guns, but they have no speed at all. Alright, finally one of the St. Louis's pops up. Now, remember, the US destroyers don't have the longest range torpedoes, so when they get into range to shoot their torpedoes, the other ship has probably spotted them. So, Osean gets off one wave of torpedoes, and again, I like these ships with two-side torpedoes because you've always got an extra side waiting to go. So he gets off one side, and that salvo goes nowhere, by the way, the one he launched. But it's not that. That's not the good part of Osean's strike. It's what happens next. It's this moment that I loved so much because it was such a efficient use of his torpedoes. So he had late smoke, so obviously they've lost spotting on these cruisers. And all of a sudden, holy crap, there they are, they popped up. And watch what he does. Osean goes, one salvo for you, one salvo for you. Isn't that like the prettiest thing? Take a look at that. Isn't that like the prettiest torpedo salvos? Now, he bags himself one, the other one manages to dodge the one torpedo, but yeah, Osean's friend manages to help him out, and they bag themselves two St. Louis's in a very, very, very short period of time. So that was good teamwork and also a very nice torpedo strike, Osean. And of course, none of these episodes are ever going to be complete without me showing you at least one, of my own replay highlights during the week. So here I am in a Grem, and you can take a look at the map. I am in like the worst situation possible. Grem, multiple enemy ships closing around, and no real team to speak of backing me up here. So, I'm in trouble. But remember what I told you guys about the Grem in the AP versus HE video. The Grem has AP, and it can work against cruisers. So there's the Omaha. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do as many Citadel hits as possible and do as much damage with my guns as possible. And I'm also trying to get off some torpedo hits, not against that particular Omaha, but actually against the Murmansk that was coming around the corner. Now that Omaha turned away, which was a smart thing because as soon as he turns away, I can no longer hit his armor. But that Murmansk, see, he thinks that I'm not that big of a threat, right? Because, he just sort of gives me his broadside and just two salvos, and look how much HP that Murmansk has lost. Now, I should have aimed that one a little bit further back, but it's okay. Here we go. Now the Murmansk has turned. He's presented me an angle that I can't really pen. So you see me sort of hold back my shots. I'm holding back. I'm sort of waiting for him to give me a better angle, a better side to shoot. There we go. He turns. It's giving me that big, nice Citadel. There's another 3 Citadel hits. 7,500 damage for a cruiser to take from a destroyer is painful. There you go. More hits. And now I'm just going to use my 2 forward guns, and I'm going to try to end him with Citadel hits. And this poor cruiser is just going to get absolutely wrecked. There you go. Finished him off with Citadel hits. There's an Omaha. Now, I know that his guns can get me, but I'm also worried a little bit about his torpedoes. So I'm using that Murmansk's corpse as a little bit of a protection from the other cruiser's torpedoes before I was able to get off one final salvo. And, of course, in the situation that I was in, I was pretty screwed. Of course, this salvo was glorious. And in like the worst circumstances possible for a destroyer, I bagged myself 2 cruisers in a very short period of time. Not bad, right? Now, this next replay was also me in a premium destroyer, this time a Sims. And this time I was with Tedster on the team, and mind you, I have to give Tedster a shout out here. He was a fantastic destroyer captain for this battle. Was really good, and we worked together as a team really, really well. And, there's only 2 enemy Miyokos left, and we still have a battleship, and I've got me and Ted, and so we've got to deal with this last remaining Miyoko. First I try torpedoes, because I'm thinking, if this Miyoko doesn't pay attention, he's going to sail straight into these torpedoes, and that's it. Well, my torpedoes actually don't make contact, but the battleship on our team does make contact, drops him to 501 health, and I try to finish him off with guns, except all of my shells get eaten and absorbed by buildings. So I pull off, watch this, a bit of a World of Tanks moment. I'm like aiming, oh look, there's a gap. And I backed myself that kill. And that's a wrap for episode 5 of Nautical Tales. Remember folks, if you've got awesome moments on replays, whatnot, and you want to know how to send it to me, instructions are in the video description below. Aside from that, I'm looking forward to seeing more of those. If you like what I'm doing, like and sub. Have a great week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the high seas.